What is up, everybody? Matt Modi here to give you some WNBA bangers for tomorrow's WNBA betting slates. We're talking Saturday, July 6th. There are two games on the WNBA betting slate for tomorrow, and I am going to have three plays for you guys to lock in. Two plays as of right now, as of the time of this recording. One of the games we're still waiting on odds, so I actually just have a lean, I should say, out for that one. So two official plays and one lean, I should say, for tomorrow's betting slate. Excuse me, before we can get into that, I just want to do a recap. So last time I had plays was on July 2nd, and that was an amazing day. I had three plays on that day. We got all three of those to cash. Thank you to the Fever for covering the -5-point spread. Thank you to Asia Wilson for going over 26.5 points. And thank you for the Mystics for covering 1.5 points as well in that game, 3-0, which finally brings us in the green on the season. Albeit slightly green, up 0.41 units. Not the most amazing WNBA season that we're having in the world, but we'll take being green on the year. And hopefully the success that we had on July 2nd means that we can also hope for future success as well. So would appreciate it if you guys could subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are not already. And let's get into these bangers. So the first game on the schedule for tomorrow, it's actually being played pretty early at 1 p.m. Eastern, so definitely make sure to look out for that. It's the Liberty versus the Fever, and I'm taking that game to go over 170. You can get this at -113 odds at Bet Rivers. I'm taking the total to go over in this one. Even if it moves out, honestly, take this total up to 172. So by the time you're watching this, if you can get 171.5 or above, go ahead and lock that bad boy in. So looking at the matchup here, these two teams have played 3 times so far this year. So this will be their 4th matchup. Here are the point totals that the Liberty have scored against the Fever in those 3 games. 104, 91, and 102. They've scored over 100 points in 2 of the games. In the other game, they scored over 90, which obviously it's a 3-game sample size. But if you just average those out, that would be the most points scored in the WNBA by a mile. They have just absolutely poured it on the Fever defense, and that's something that I see continuing in this game. Even though the Fever had they've played better recently. They're 4-3 in their last 7 games. That's mostly been on the backs of their offense, which obviously does help this total going over. Is their offense playing well? But looking at their defense is still really bad. They've also had a much easier schedule, which has had something to do with their improved defense. If you look at their last 7 games, which, as I mentioned, they are 4-3, which doesn't sound amazing, but when you look at their entire season, 4-3 is actually pretty good. And in those 7 games, they have a defensive net rating of 104.9. That is the 4th worst defensive net rating over the last 7 games. And if you extrapolated that defensive rating net out for the entire year, that would also be the 4th worst. But if you look at the entire season, they still have the worst defensive net rating in the WNBA. And look at the games they've played, the teams they've played in their last 7 games. They've only played a top half offense in 2 of those games, the Storm and the Aces, 2 really good offenses, and they allowed 89 and 88 points in those 2 games. Now the Liberty offense has been better than both of those offenses on the season and over the last 7 games. And if you just look at 89, 88 points per game, that's above the Fever's season average, and that would be the worst point total allowed in the WNBA if you just average that out. Again, a 2-game sample size is small, but that's the level of offense they'll be facing, if not better. So the Liberty should be able to score 90-plus points, 100-plus points once again. I would not be shocked. The Liberty's offense is as good as ever over the last 7 games. Best offensive net rating in the WNBA with the 2nd best true shooting and the 2nd best effective field goal percentage in that stretch as well. Then looking at the other side of the ball, as I mentioned, the success that the Fever have had recently has been on the backs of their offense. 4th best offensive net rating in the WNBA over the last 7 games with an offensive rating of 105. And if you took that net rating, that would be the 3rd best in the NBA if you just extrapolated that out for the entire season. Now, the Liberty defense isn't horrible. I'm not going to say that they're terrible like the Fever defense or anything like that, but they're really not that special either. They're the 5th ranked defensive net rating over the last 7 games. On the entire season, they're allowing the 5th worst effective field goal percentage. In the Fever, I expect them to be able to score 80-plus points in this one, while the Liberty, I expect them to score 90-plus points in this one. You add all that up together, that gets you a total above 170. And if you can't get that number, I would take it above 171.5. That's our first play. Next up, we're sticking in the same game, Fever versus Liberty. I'm going to have a player prop in this game. I'm taking Breanna Stewart to go over 20.5 points. This is at -114 odds. at FanDuel. And I would play this up to about -125, which you can get at some books if the FanDuel number changed. But a play that I absolutely love for this same game, Breanna Stewart over her point total. The 3 games that these two teams have played against each other, she scored 31, 24, and 13 points. So she's averaging just about 23 points per game in those 3 games, comfortably going over twice and then going under in the last one. But look at that game. The last time these two teams played, the Liberty won that game by 36. So Breanna Stewart did not play her normal allotment of minutes. This game you expect to be not a 36-point game. And also, Breanna Stewart just kind of shot poorly in that game. That happens, right? They're going to have bad shooting games. This is still a really, really good matchup against a Fever defense that I have told you is already still bad, not again any better on the year. And we also get a nice fade of recent results for Breanna Stewart as well. Her last outing, not her last outing against the Fever, but literally her last game played, she only scored 17 points. She was 5 of 20 from the field in that game, and she was 0 of 5 from deep. So you figure that she'll just shoot better in this game, and that's not even talking about the matchup. Her last game was against the Lynx, the best defense in the WNBA, which we'll get into. This is a great matchup that we will detail right now. So Breanna Stewart, the majority of her points, if you just look at where they come from, it's at the line. She's really, really good at drawing fouls and getting to the line. She gets to the line over the last 5 games at the second best rate in the WNBA, and she shoots about 87% from the line. Well, the Fever literally foul at the highest rate in the WNBA over the last 10 games on the season. Any sample size you really look at, the Fever fouled the highest rate in the WNBA. You look at the first 2 games that these two teams played in which Breanna Stewart went over, she attempted 6 and 8 free throws. That's about the range you can expect in this game as well. 6 to 8 free throws. Hopefully she makes 6 to 8 of them, so she goes 100% of the line. That's just free points that she's getting at the line. And this is all per Props Madness. I should give them a shout out. That's where I'm finding all this data. I don't have a partnership with them. They're just a really good website. And again, free throws make up the majority of the points scored for Breanna Stewart at 19%. Next up, the second most of her points come via transition. The Fever have the 5th worst transition defense in the WNBA. They allow the 5th most points per game via transition. That's the second most points is transition. 3rd and 4th, post up and spot up opportunities. So she's really good in the post, and she also spots up pretty well. The Fever have the 3rd and the 4th worst defense in those categories respectively. So the top 4 areas in which Breanna Stewart scores, the Fever have the worst defense, the 3rd worst, the 4th worst, and the 5th worst. Really, really good matchup for Breanna Stewart. And then just looking at like where the shots on the floor come from as well. We're looking at like different play types. If you just look at where does Breanna Stewart score, she scores the most points on the Liberty and actually the 2nd most points in the entire WNBA in the paint, but the non-restricted area of the paint. Basically what the Fever do, they don't have anybody that's great guarding down low, so they kind of just pack the paint, leaving that extended paint area wide open. Again, we're talking about in the paint, but not in the restricted area. The Fever give up the 2nd most shots per game in that area over the last 10 games. And again, Breanna Stewart makes the most points from that area on the Liberty by far, and the 2nd most in the entire WNBA in that area of the court. So she should have a great game tomorrow, especially after having a poor game her last game out. She's going to want to play better, and just it's just natural that the shooting percentage swings back the other way after a poor shooting percentage last time out. That's our second and only, I guess our second and final, is what I should say, official play. The 3rd play that I don't unfortunately have odds for, so I cannot make it an official play as of this point in time, but the Mystics are playing the Lynx. And whenever the odds come out for the Mystics team total, I'm going to heavily look at that going under. Obviously, we need to see what the total is. If it's, a reasonable number, I am going to take that to go under. I'm going to give you all the reasons why. I just want to preface this, that there are no odds out. So as soon as odds get posted, check with me on Twitter at JediModi. I will make this an official play. Also check with me. I do have a Dub Club as well. That's $5 a month. Gets you everything that I give out on Dub Club. Those 2 areas are where I give out all my plays that don't go out on YouTube, so make sure to check those out. And now we can get into the matchup. So the Mystics, they've actually been playing pretty good basketball recently. They started out 0 of 12 or 0 of 13. They've actually been playing pretty decent. They just have a ton of injuries, which they've been dealing with injuries the entire year, where there's one player out, Stephanie Dolson, who missed the last game, and she has been playing the majority of the season. That's the biggest injury that they're missing, is Stephanie Dolson. She missed last game. The Mystics got routed 98-77 in that game on July 4th against the Aces, and the Aces don't have a good defense at all. Definitely not like the Lynx. And it's just really tough for the Mystics to score with Stephanie Dolson off the court. If you look at their on-off splits and their offensive net rating when she is off the court is at 94.8, that would be the worst offensive net rating in the entire WNBA. As I mentioned, really just have a tough time scoring without her. And this is a really bad matchup against a phenomenal Lynx defense. I mentioned that the Mystics only scored 77 points against the Aces. That's pretty damning because the Aces have one of the worst defenses at guarding above the break three-pointers. And that's one thing that the Mystics have been doing really well recently. They attempted and made the second most above the break three-pointers over the last 10 games. You look at the Lynx defense, they have literally allowed the fewest made above the break three-pointers over the last 10 games. So it's not a good matchup play in general, not even talking about the injury. And also in general, the Lynx defense is phenomenal. Over the last 10 games, the Lynx have the best defensive net rating in the WNBA. They're allowing the lowest opponent effective field goal percentage in the WNBA. They're also playing at the third slowest pace. So not only are they really good, they're also slow. You put all that together, they're allowing the fewest opponent points per game over the last 10 games in the entire WNBA. Just hard to see a scenario in which the Mystics are able to score a lot of points in this one, which is why I lean towards that team total under. I just can't give out a number that doesn't exist. If it's in the 60s, low 60s, I'm not going to play it. But if it's a reasonable number, then I will play it. So definitely make sure to follow me on Twitter, all that stuff. And that's how we got 2 official bangers, 1 lean for you guys to lock in. We're coming off of a 3-0 day last time out in the WNBA. Let's hope we can keep that going. Would appreciate it if you could like the video, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And have a good one.